This is the Whole Care Network, helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome, my friend. This is A Time to Care, the Caregivers podcast. I'm Isabel Melgarejo, your host. And today with me, I have Alex Hall, women's health and wellness professional, aka a fitness coach. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
So I'm really excited to have you here today because you talk a lot about menopause and how our lives change during that period in our lives. So what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so just so you're aware with myself, so I started working primarily with women going through menopause around just short of a year ago. I realized that the way that your body's responding does change quite significantly compared to maybe when you're a little younger. And, I was working with a wider variety of men and women at that time. And I noticed that women that were in that phase of menopause within their life, anywhere between 40 and 55, I noticed that their response to their diet, their exercise, it changed quite a lot. So I guess that's some of the main things to be aware of is how your body starts to respond differently to things, not just things in the physical realm. So obviously muscle loss can start to occur. Bone health can start to deteriorate a little bit. You often hear the word like osteoporosis being mentioned in relation to menopause, where weaker bones start to occur. But there's also symptoms around cognition as well. So women often experience things like brain fog, where their short-term memory can seem like it's been affected. Also things like mood swings, night sweats. To be honest, since I've been working with women in menopause primarily, the list of symptoms just seems to get longer and longer. There seems to be so many different things that can affect women, both in the physical and also the mental realm as well. So yeah, just a big transition phase of life that I think it's important that people are prepared for and have the knowledge about, because I think it's getting better within social media, but certainly something that I've seen improve even in the last year from when I started working with women in menopause is there wasn't really enough coverage of it, or there still isn't loads of coverage. So it can be quite hard to know what's going on due to the lack of information, I would say.
So how would this impact women who's caring for their children and also caring for a spouse and the whole home and their parents?
I think that's a really good point, and something that I see with a lot of my clients, and a really important thing to talk about is that it can often occur because menopause itself is just one day. It's the one day after 12 months without a menstrual cycle. It just signals that one day, and that's when menopause has occurred. And then after that, you're in postmenopause. But the period leading up to that, which is known as perimenopause, can last for, seven, even a bit longer, like 7 years for some people. Like you said, then that can come at a time where you're still caring for children, whatever age they may be. They can be, still in their formative years or starting to get a bit older. Yeah, you've obviously, handling a relationship with your spouse, maybe caring for aging parents, that are starting to need more support from family. And a lot of the time with a lot of my clients, you're still in a position career-wise where there's a lot of responsibility, there's a lot of high pressure. You might be leading a team at your company, and then all of a sudden you get hit with this barrage of symptoms where you feel like you can't think straight, your body temperature's all over the place, you noticing weight gain that you've not noticed before, your energy levels are really dipping. So it becomes even more important, I would say. And I think the thing that you mentioned there around, how do you support at a time when you're still caring for a lot of other people, is to really look at your lifestyle and to look at what are you putting in your body, what are you eating, how much are you drinking, what kind of exercise are you doing, and also what a big thing I focus on with my clients is what kind of things are you consuming. And by that I mean the media that you watch. Is it quite inspirational? Is it uplifting, or is it quite fear mongering? Is it leaving a feeling of dread in you? What are your relationships like? Are you in social circles where the culture is very much based around drinking a lot of alcohol or gossiping about people, or is it more of a inspiring conversations, progressive conversations? I like to think really holistically, because those things are often, I think, undervalued by people, but the environment that you place yourself in plays a massive role as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I usually make a friendship declutter every once
Mm.
in a while. Like, I think there's people that shouldn't be in our lives and conversations that we shouldn't be having, and maybe news that we shouldn't be reading all the time. I completely agree. How does like all these brain fog and how do you think it affects women the most in their personal lives? How do you think it affects them? What do you recommend for them to go through these changes in a smoother way?
Yeah, with the cognitive symptoms around like brain fog, memory loss, like some short-term memory loss, that kind of thing. I think it has a massive effect on day-to-day life. Certainly, from a career perspective, I wrote an article actually on LinkedIn because I've read a statistic that around 10% of women going through menopause will leave their profession because they feel that like the brain fog, the cognitive symptoms stop them from being able to do their job properly. So it has a really big impact there. But then in their personal life as well, I think it can just lead to a big loss of confidence. And a lot of clients that I work with, when I have the initial call with them, the thing I hear quite often is, I have lost my confidence and I feel like I don't really know who I am anymore in my body because there's so many changes going on and I don't understand them. And a lot of that is down to those cognitive changes, that brain fog, that lack of clarity. And I think the big things you can do there is looking at your lifestyle, looking at your nutrition. Obviously, a big factor here that can have a huge impact is hormone therapy, like HRT treatment. That's outside of my scope as a professional. That's something that you would talk around with your local physician, your family doctor, that kind of thing. But from a lifestyle and nutrition perspective, I was listening to a podcast actually the other day with, she's called Dr. Lisa Mosconi. She's wrote a couple of books, one called The Menopause Brain, and she's a neuroscientist, and she's really, really like leading the way in cognitive symptoms around menopause and the best solutions for that kind of thing. She's brilliant, and she says one of the best things you can do for your brain by far and away, and it surprised me, the best thing she said is just drinking enough water by an absolute mile. That's one of the best things you can do. I've definitely noticed that, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but I think the generation coming through, when I'm in the gym or even just when I'm out and about, I've noticed that a lot of people just carry water bottles around now, like in the backpacks, and they generally drink more. Whereas I feel like a generation or two ago, people would drink like a cup of coffee in the morning, have a glass of water with their meal, and that was it. They wouldn't really drink much. So I think there's definitely a generational thing about not drinking enough. I certainly think that's a factor, but drinking enough water is something that can help massively. Some of the other really, really good food options you can look at, well, one of the best ones is fatty sources of fish. So they contain like omega-3 fatty acids, which are a source of polyunsaturated fat, and they're really, really good for brain function and brain development. So trying to incorporate things into your diet like salmon. I know salmon can be quite expensive, so some of the cheaper options are like tinned sardines, mackerel, that kind of thing. Trying to get those things into your diet a few times a week are really, really beneficial. And then another good option if you're potentially vegetarian is flax seeds, walnuts. They contain another form of polyunsaturated fat that's good for brain health as well. And then berries. Berries are excellent, really, really good source of antioxidants and support brain function as well. So like blueberries, raspberries, that kind of thing. So it doesn't need to be too complicated, just looking at adding some of those things into your diet, drinking more water. And then another massive factor, I think, is just simply getting fresh air, spending a bit more time outside, a bit more time walking. And a little bit like we were speaking around them, when you do the friend declutter thing, what I found with doing that kind of thing is I try and tune into myself and think, right, when I watch this news channel or when I have this conversation with this individual, how does my body feel when I walk away from that? And you'll notice that if it is like a quite jarring news channel, or if it is a conversation where it's a very gossipy relationship that's talking about other people all the time, my body feels like quite tense when I'm speaking with those people. Whereas if it's more of an uplifting piece of content, a great conversation that's really thought provoking, I feel a lot looser and a lot more relaxed. And a lot of clients I work with have noticed that as well. That ties in with the getting outside a bit more, I would say, like fresh air. Actually going out for a walk, if you're lucky enough that you live close to somewhere that's a bit more natural, you could walk through some woods, by a river, you just feel like refreshed from it. So I feel like that helps with the brain fog side of things as well.
This is the reason that I wanted to bring you over, because we often talk about like everything that's happening in our lives in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And I think it is a period in women's life with a lot of change. Part of that change is physical change that we don't stop to acknowledge.
Mm,
We acknowledge that we have kids, and maybe like some women are going into the empty nester kind of era. Some of them are in the sandwich generation, taking care of younger children and their parents. Some of them are going through major changes in their work life. All of these changes are just compounded over the physical changes that we don't stop to acknowledge. And what you're saying right now is that if we take care of of the physical changes that are happening in us, we also take care of other changes, because you're talking about being in the woods, about being outside, walking, having a self-care routine,
mm,
having healthy relationships. And all of this are things that I recommend my clients to do to have a healthy lifestyle and promote their self-care. So
mm,
I just find it super interesting. So,
mm,
what other tips and tricks? And this is going to be something for me. I've always been thin, and the past, I don't know, 3 years, my weight has been up and down. And probably this is something that a lot of women can relate to.
mm.
So, what do you do in those cases?
Absolutely. People that I work with, people that I speak to, it is quite a common problem, like a difference in weight fluctuation and weight gain, that kind of thing. The best things you can do from my perspective when it comes to exercise and movement, it's for the biggest thing I would say is doing something that is manageable from a time perspective. Because like we were speaking about earlier, we're talking about a time in life where your time is usually quite stretched as it is. So your bandwidth might be pretty well stretched. So, if you started working with someone who was suggesting, right, I expect you to be going to the gym 5 times a week and working out for 2 hours at a time, like it's just not feasible. So it's finding things that are going to work for you, because if you want to see that difference in body composition, the key is not just the exercise, but also the adherence to it. So being able to keep doing it consistently. And in order to do that, it needs to fit in with your lifestyle. So I suggest a lot of people that I work with, it's starting with, 20-minute home-based workout sessions. If you're not comfortable going to the gym, or if that's not convenient or an added cost, working out at home, you can start as simply as just with body weight, or you can use resistance bands or simple dumbbells, and just starting with some basic home sessions, around the 20-minute, 30-minute mark, just getting used to it. And I would say a couple of them a week will start to have a big benefit, especially if you're new to strength training, because within the strength training realm, there's this idea of, they call it like newbie gains. So if you've not strength trained before, your body can respond really dramatically to it, basically. And you can start to see a change in body composition, a change in body weight quite quickly, in the first month or so. So a couple of times a week doing something like that. But then something that I also put a lot of focus on is, what do you really enjoy doing from an exercise perspective. Because if it is a case that lifting weights, like the thought of that bores you to death, like, it's not for everyone. I totally understand that. I think there's an element of it being more important as you go into menopause because of the risk of, decreased bone density, of loss of muscle, that kind of thing. But also what's really important is making sure you're doing something that brings you a lot of joy and uplifts you. So with some of my clients, we factor in that they love dancing, so they go to a dance class once a week. With others, they love horse riding, or some love hiking. So to see the change you want, it doesn't just have to be, oh, I need to drag myself to the gym, or I need to start doing bicep curls and squats. Like, yes, they are important, but you can also see really good benefits. If you love hiking locally, get out and do that, or if you love swimming, go swimming, like factor in something that you enjoy. Because the key above everything for me is doing exercise with a bit of resistance that you enjoy doing and you can see yourself doing long into the future. And then you'll see the initial change that you want, and then you'll be able to stick at that change. Because I guess something within the health and fitness space you won't be surprised at is that it's quite common for people to achieve a goal, but then rebound and then, go backwards. So say they had a weight loss goal, you might achieve that goal, but then over the next couple of years, slowly start to regain the weight and get back to where they were. And that's, for me, I argue that's because what they were doing wasn't sustainable and it wasn't enjoyable for them. So we need to tie in. It's something that you can see yourself doing into the future.
That is so important, I think. And I think as younger people, like we, as kids especially, we do, or at least myself, I was very active until my late 20s,
Mm,
early 30s. The activities that I was doing as a kid in particular
mm,
were very different than the activities that I'm doing today.
mhm.
As a kid, I was dancing, I was a fencer. So I had a bunch of activities that I was doing for long periods of time. And I do enjoy lifting weights, but probably I think we need to start focusing more on what we really like and not so much into what's convenient. So what is a good way, because this has happened to me. I want to go back into sports or something that I think I would enjoy more and probably cutting more on the weights, but then I don't necessarily find groups with people my age. So what do you recommend in those cases? Like, where do you find or how do you find activities for adults your age in which you connect with people your age? And I don't know if you've always played soccer, maybe go back to it. I have a friend, she's in her 40s, she's a gymnast and she's going like she still practice gymnastics, but she does it with like all these younger girls. So
Oh,
how
yeah.
do you create or what do you do to create also a group of people your age? And I'm not saying the exact same age, but that they're not kids where you could practice these activities.
Something I do a little more, well, this is more specific with my clients because I work primarily online. So I have clients based in other countries, but I'm based in the UK. And I've I'm a big fan of the outdoors, hiking, that kind of thing. So I've set up a couple of times where I've met up with clients and we've gone on a bit of a hike together, because hiking's a really good one because it's a great opportunity to spend the day outside, to talk, and sneakily it's hard work at the same time, even though you don't realize it. But then you're mid conversation, you're halfway up a mountain, and you stop and think like, wow, I'm out of breath, this is tough. I think things getting outside in that respect is a really good opportunity. In terms of if it's something specific that you enjoy, like you said, so if it's gymnastics, that kind of thing, it's a good question. I would say from my experience of working with clients, I would say there's a little bit of potentially taking the initiative upon yourself, I would say, because I think what you're saying, I don't think there is that much of it. So I think there probably will be an element of taking a little bit of the initiative to maybe set something up and start something and maybe be that pioneer, that goes, actually, yeah, like for your friend, for example, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are probably had a real passion for gymnastics and would love to, maybe they finally got a bit more time than they had like 5, 6 years ago. and they'd love to get back into it more. So I would say it would be a case of using the power of like social media, of friendship groups, and just seeing if there is anyone else around that would be willing to get back into it with you. That would be my suggestion there for sure.
I don't know what you did as a kid, but I
Mm.
find the more we grow up, we move farther away from the activities that we used to love.
I used to play a lot of group sports like football or soccer, rugby, cricket, that kind of thing. And when you were saying before about how you're active into your late 20s, and then I've certainly realised as well since having a son who's 18 months now that man, it takes a toll on your time, doesn't it? Children, and there just isn't enough hours in the day for everything. And I think we're just accepting that this is a time of life where some things have to give. One thing I found, which is a little bit off, a little bit of a tangent from what you've said, is I found really useful, and it's something I've started doing more this year, is and it's great for the cognition thing as well, the brain fog thing, is not overlooking the opportunity to learn new skills. You should never stop learning new skills. Your brain's it's the most like they call it neuroplasticity. Your brain can continue to learn until for your whole life. Whereas your legs reach a certain size, your heart reaches a certain size. Your brain doesn't grow anymore, but it can constantly change, even when you're 80, you're 90. So I've become a massive advocate of trying new things. You might find that there's something that you've always thought about trying that you might have a real passion for. So I wouldn't rule that out as well. Like I've started boxing this year. I've wanted to do it for about 6 or 7 years, and I finally just stopped. I pulled my socks up and thought, right, I'm never going to do this unless I actually take the plunge. So I started working with a coach, and I'm absolutely loving it, the discipline of it and everything. And I'd gone through a good 5 or 6 years when I don't think I'd taken on anything new or learned anything new. And I think that's a really important thing as well, is to keep trying new things.
Probably this is like what I think it's a key component, keep learning something new.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be movement, it just can be whatever, I
Yeah,
think.
definitely. Like a language, an instrument, anything.
So what are your final thoughts? What would you like people out there to know?
What's really interesting, I would say, and it's something I've learned more recently. So when I first started getting into the health and fitness coaching space, health and fitness wise, it started around 5 years ago. Like really getting into coaching is the last couple of years. And what I've learned is that on the surface, someone's goal can usually be something like to lose weight or to increase energy levels or maybe to build a bit of strength. And while that goal remains, what I have found is that oftentimes there's a deeper layer to it. When someone's looking to make a change around their health and fitness, a lot of it can be down to looking to maybe refine who they are again, feeling a bit lost in the heavy, heavy responsibility and weight of looking after a home, looking after children, holding down an extremely busy, pressured job, looking after older parents. It's so easy to maybe lose who you are a little bit, lose that confidence. And a lot of the time, even though on the surface you might think, oh, I'd like to get into a routine where I want to lose weight, what it really ends up being about is I'd kind of lost myself, and I needed something to help me refigure out who I am and refine that confidence. So what I would say is use the opportunity of improving your health and fitness to improve or refine yourself as a whole person. Don't just focus on what the number on the weighing scale says, or don't just focus on the dress size. Like, think about everything you're gaining from it. Are you becoming more content in your day-to-day life? Are you finding more peace? Are you feeling great from the movement that you're doing? So try to think of it in a more holistic way. Health and fitness isn't just about the weighing scales or a dress size. It's about refinding or rediscovering you. I think that's what I'd say. Although that's a little bit deep, but that's my opinion on it.
I love it. I love it because I know that like clothes are made to fit the model that
Yeah,
every company uses to like every single item of clothing was tested in a person, but that person, it's their body, it's not
yeah,
everybody else's body.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and they're making thousands and thousands of the same item to feed everybody, and we don't all have the same body. So
No, I couldn't agree more with that. Definitely. That's so true.
where can people find you and learn more about your work?
In terms of posting out content and giving people free tips and advice, it's mainly through Instagram and LinkedIn. So my Instagram is just Alex Hall Coaching. My LinkedIn is just Alex Hall Online Health and Fitness Coach. And I just try to provide free information and tips around exercise, nutrition, lifestyle. And I also have a community page around menopause support where I have free educational videos and documents on managing symptoms, managing your nutrition. And there's a community space in there with other women going through menopause, which is, really supportive and everyone helps each other out. So there's that as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining. And for everybody out there, go and follow up Alex Hall. I follow him on LinkedIn and I love all of his tips and information that he puts out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.